Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. This is your host, Dr. Michael Kudlas. I'm a chiropractor in Kalamazoo, Michigan, the greatest city, as far as I can tell, in the world. We're the only one with a promise that if you send your children to public school in Kalamazoo, Kalamazoo will give your children, upon graduation, a 4-year scholarship to a college in Michigan, a public school college in Michigan. So not too many other cities can guarantee that your child will get a college education. In fact, I don't know of a single one. Only Kalamazoo with its Kalamazoo promise. Now, every week when you come in, we're talking about speaking of health. So we're talking about health. In our society, most of it's designed around disease. And we actually have health care and health insurance, but it only pays when you're sick. And it doesn't pay to keep you healthy unless they're looking for disease. And there's all kinds of research, particularly coming out of the field of chiropractic, that demonstrates that maintaining the level of health you have is far better than trying to regain it after you've lost it. And in fact, we don't even know how healthy human beings can be. It wasn't until the 1960s where psychologists and psychiatrists, that field of medicine, even started to look at what is a healthy individual. Then Abraham Maslow came out with what was actually called the third force psychology, actually figuring out, well, what's healthy? How do we know what a healthy person is? How can we tell what a sick person is if we don't know what a healthy person is? And he began to look at what makes up the self-actualized individual. And so when we're looking at health, we have to recognize that there's different levels. Psychology is one of them, mental, emotional health. Spinal integrity, chiropractic is another. Good nutrition is also a necessity. Positive mental attitude, that's where psychology fits in. And so we have a lot of different things that we're looking at. And in the health balance, we talk about rest, exercise, good nutrition, positive mental attitude, and spinal integrity. And that's extraordinarily important if you want to maintain your health. If you go with the attitude of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, then that's kind of a silly way to do things. That's like taking your car and driving it until the engine light comes on and says, well, the engine light's on, but there's nothing wrong with it. I'll keep driving until it seizes up on the road and has to be towed in for repair. That doesn't make any sense at all. You wouldn't treat your car that way. Why would you treat yourself that way? So when we're talking about health care, we're talking about not even maintaining your health, but continuously caring for it so you can become healthier and healthier and healthier. The epitome of health, the very best that you can become, God's gift on this planet as a soul that represents and demonstrates the finest possible ways to express yourself here. Health, 100% function. And today, our guest, Dr. Paul Ginter, kind of epitomizes that with the work that he does. Dr. Paul is a family systems, internal family systems trainer and psychologist, and internal family systems. We're going to talk a little bit about that. It's really quite a unique model in helping people find who they are, expressing themselves to their peak potential emotionally and mentally. Dr. Paul got his beginning degrees from Albion College, a BA. He got master's degrees, more than one, from the University of Iowa and Western Michigan University, and he got his doctorate in counseling psychology also from Western Michigan University, one of the finest universities in the United States, if not the world. He works as a practicing psychologist at the Center for Psychotherapy and Wellness here in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and he's internationally known throughout the world as a senior trainer for the Center of Self-Leadership, in which they deal with the internal family systems model. Paul, good morning. Are you there?
Good morning. I am here. Yes.
So glad to hear your voice.
Yeah, it's
So,
great to hear yours.
with the family systems model, or the internal family systems model, that has a very unique title to it. Can you give us some information as to how that looks at man and how that looks at his psychological and emotional makeup?
Sure. Well, first of all, let me just say I appreciate being on your show, and it's great to be talking about these kind of things. Very excited about this particular kind of work, so it's fun for me to talk about it. Internal family systems was something that was started by a man named Dr. Richard Schwartz, Dick Schwartz, in Chicago about 30 years ago or so, and many people have heard the term family systems, and this is called internal family systems. And just say a couple words about that. In the around probably 40 years ago, there was a pretty strong movement in psychology of the family therapy movement that really looked at not so much about what was happening going on inside people, but more what was happening between people, and really a strong emphasis on the systemic nature of those interactions. When one person in the family began to do one thing, this might have a certain impact on other parts of the family and so forth. And so they were at the time focused on more external relationships. And then this Dick Schwartz, who was a family therapist at the time, he began to be interested in some clients that he was working with, what was happening in their internal world, and he began to see that many of the same dynamics were happening inside people as were happening on the outside. So I'll just say a couple words about that. That this model is really based on this idea that we're all, in essence, multiple personalities. We wouldn't, most of us that might be listening to this wouldn't be diagnosed that way because we wouldn't be an extreme version of that. But it is based on this idea that we all have these different parts of us. We just call them parts, but these subpersonalities that all have different consciousness to them. So it's not just that I'm having two different thoughts about whether I ought to get out of bed this morning. Some part of me that wants to sleep in some more, and some other part that's excited about getting up and doing something. But those aren't just thoughts, according to this model. It really is that there are these subpersonalities inside that have different perspectives, see the world differently, have different feelings, and begin to interact with each other. So I can say more about that.
Then the expression, depending on which subpersonality is present, that personality's expression is the one that shows up.
Exactly. Right.
Okay.
And hopefully, and we can say more about this, but hopefully the one that shows up is the most fitting given the circumstance that's happening in the world, so we can really pull on these different aspects of ourselves in ways that are very healthy. But there are ways that sometimes these parts of us get into fights, or there's conflict, or we tend to push away different parts of us, or parts of us take over in a way that they come on too strong in ways that might create suffering for us or for others.
Yeah, I can imagine that. It's sort of like, I suppose all of us have had the experience where our spouse or significant other or close friend comes and we start talking to them, and all of a sudden we go, "What happened to you? Which side of the bed did you get up on today?"
Right.
That kind of thing, sort of like the wrong one shows up, in other words.
Yes, right.
Yeah, right. And that's usually based, do you find that's usually based on something that's going on inside that individual where he's not happy with it, and he may not even be happy with the one that shows up, but he's kind of stuck with it because that's the one, based on how he relates internally with the outside world, that's the one that has dominance at that time. Is that accurate?
I think that's true. I mean, certain external circumstances may draw different parts of us out, but so much of that really does depend on our own internal system. So, for example, and this will actually touch on one of the I think the most important principles of this internal family systems work, is that if somebody, say somebody's having a conversation with somebody else and they mention something, maybe a past thing, and the person feels guilty or feels shame or feels some kind of vulnerability about what's been mentioned. Well, the person, rather than having to feel shame or feel that the discomfort of that vulnerable place, they may get real assertive or may get angry or may shut down in some way. And in this particular way of working, we would say that that's that the anger or the shutting down or whatever, although it may not be very functional, it may not lead to great things, but it actually is designed to be protective in some way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
It's almost as if that person is, the way I see that is like they're protecting themselves, and at the same time, that part is coming up for healing. That, this is inappropriate, but here it is, and here we are. We can heal this if we know what we're doing and we know how to approach it, and we have the courage to go ahead and do that. Is that how you'd see that?
Right, that's right, and I think it's about. You're right. It's a lot about courage, and I think it's and to be able to understand the way that this tends to work within us as humans, it's helpful. So, for example, again, if I find myself getting really irritated with somebody, or a client is getting irritated with someone, well, I'll go ahead and stick with me. If I'm getting irritated, then I can, based on this systemic model, I can know, okay, there's the part of me that's irritated or angry, and yet, not always, but most likely, there's something that has been touched in me that is feeling really vulnerable. And so the idea here is, how can I begin to be in relationship with that vulnerable part of me? How can I begin to heal the vulnerable part of me so that I don't have to feel irritated or shift or protect myself by being angry at somebody or blaming somebody else or whatever it is that I do with that. So, right. So here's this moment where it's being expressed as some agitation or some irritation or anger, but really there's something else happening inside there that, like you just said, is a great opportunity to do some healing work.
Okay, let's talk more about that when we come back. We're going to take a break right now. And this is Dr. Michael Kudlas. This is Speaking of Health. And we're talking with Dr. Paul Ginter. We'll be right back.
A fresh look at today's health. Voice America Health and Wellness.
Speaking of Health is brought to you by Old Time Medicinal's essential oil formulas. Remedies from yesterday to help you heal today. Have aches, pain, muscle soreness, inflamed joints, or stiffness cut into the joy of your life? Have you been denied the health, wealth, and happiness you deserve? Old Time Medicinals has life-changing products to help you help yourself to a pain-free existence. For more information, email us at oldtimemedicinals@gmail.com. Get your life back now. Email oldtimemedicinals@gmail.com.
It's no secret that teen girls and young women all across North America are struggling with diminished self-worth, depression, eating disorders, and self-harm. The good news? Tune in to The Mary Walden Show for a mental health boost. Raising and empowering young women, mind, body, and spirit. Join Mary and her guests, clinicians, artists, musicians, and researchers to get the knowledge and the know-how to build resilience in teen girls and young women today. The Mary Walden Show airs live Tuesdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific on Voice America Health and Wellness.
Opinions, options, answers. Voice America Health and Wellness.
You are tuned in to Speaking of Health with Dr. Michael Kudlas. To reach Dr. Kudlas or his guest today, please call 1-866-472-5792. That's 1-866-472-5792. You may also send an email to drmkudlas, speaking of health, @gmail.com. Now, back to Speaking of Health.
Welcome back. Dr. Michael Kudlas here, and we're talking with Dr. Paul Ginter, an expert on internal family systems therapy. And with this systems, there's a way you go about it. And with internal family systems, they have certain parts, and they talk about the self, and they talk about the internal system and the method and how that works. And with the parts, they have managers and exiles and firefighters. And it's like, geez, I always wanted to be a firefighter. I didn't know I had one of those inside of me. But can you give us a little input on the parts of this system and how it's so helpful for people?
Yeah, I can do that. At some point in time, this Dr. Dick Schwartz ended up seeing that there seemed to be these categories of subpersonalities or parts, and so this is the way he characterized them, that there were parts that he called managers, and they tended to be very proactive, and they wanted to control things in many ways, and to control things so that people wouldn't end up experiencing the kind of tenderness or the being overwhelmed by parts that we call exiles. So exiles are often the younger, wounded parts of us that feel shame or fear. And so these manager parts are parts that proactively try to have us not do that. So, if we do everything perfectly, if we keep a list, if we, fill our day with a lot of busyness, then perhaps we won't tap into places in us that feel vulnerable. So those are two of the parts. So one is the exile that are more vulnerable, and then the managers that are protective in a proactive way. And then if we do in fact tap into shame or fear or great sadness, and we say, wow, that feels too much, that's really difficult to feel those things, then sometimes we have something called, that Dick Schwartz coined the term, firefighters, and those are that refers to putting out the fires of the emotional world, really. And so those are things like addiction. People will not want to feel, so they'll drink, or they'll shop, or they'll be sex addicts, or whatever that is. And so firefighters are more reactive. They tend to be very extreme, and that's their function.
And then the manager's job is to sort of project out into the world how they see this person, or like me, my manager would project out into the world the way I want the world to see me, as this wonderful, magnificent individual that never makes a mistake or has any problems.
Exactly, right.
Okay. Is that sort of like the ego?
Yeah, that is. I guess that's the closest part, that we do think about it differently than the whole Freudian thing, but yeah, it definitely is the ego. It has that kind of function to present to the world in a way that's going to be acceptable.
And so these exiles, these are, and I may be using this wrong, so correct me if I'm not correct, if I'm incorrect. The exiles have been shunted off by the managers because they don't present the ideal view?
Yeah, and because they're hurting, and people don't want to have to hurt. So, so these managers push those parts away. And this is really actually something I think is really helpful as a way of thinking about our internal lives, is that, it's not always just the exiles. It might be other parts of us that we push away, like anger, that tends to be has a kind of a protective function, and we're often, we may not like the fact that we have anger, and so we push it away and push it away and push it away, and then all of a sudden something builds up, and all of a sudden we're enraged. So the issue isn't necessarily that we have a part of us that gets angry, because we actually may need a part like that in the right circumstance. But the issue is that we're so busy pushing it away and disowning it, or it takes us over and overwhelms us so much that we end up that creates problems. So the issue isn't that it's there; it's that we're not in relationship with it in a way that's healthy. So there's kind of a middle ground.
And that's a key thing, because I don't think we're taught that emotions are natural, healthy responses. There's not a good emotion or a bad emotion. There's just emotions.
Right.
But it's how we kind of are taught to react to certain ones, like anger or upset or any of the others that have been judged, quote, bad. And so we kind of lose track of the fact that God gave us these healthy responses called emotions to let us truly express ourselves in the world.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And I won't get into all this, but this model also sees that there are these different levels of systems. And so in addition to our internal system, there's also cultural systems. And so as you already alluded to, our society isn't very accepting of vulnerability or anger or lots of things, other kinds of intense emotion. We tend to want to push those away as a culture, and we don't teach people how to do that.
Yeah. And I think we see that in our culture, too, sort of a leftover Puritan mentality with a lot of things and how things are okay. It's okay to go to war, but it's not okay to do some of the other things we find our congressmen doing on a regular basis.
Right.
Yeah. And so what about the self now? So in all of this, what about the me in me, myself, and I?
Yeah, it's a good question. This is a very core part of this work, and I think part of what helps it to be so powerful. Actually, let me give a really quick illustration of kind of a prototypical session to be able to get us to this place of looking at the self. So, and again, I'm just going to say it in a very simple way. It doesn't always play out this easily, but as an illustration, I'll just do this. So somebody comes to my office and they're really scared. They have a lot of anxiety, and we start talking about that, and where do you feel that in your body, and are there thoughts or words connected to that, and so somebody finally begins to, as they're talking about that, I might say, well, is there an image that's connected to that feeling in your chest or in your gut? And the words like, oh no, something bad's going to happen. Is there an image? And they might say, oh yeah, I see a 6-year-old boy. And so in this work, this is part of the amazing effectiveness of this internal family systems work. There's these kind of basic questions that you ask. In this case, you say, well, how do you feel toward this 6-year-old boy? And the person might say, well, I hate him, he's so wimpy. And so you can say, well, can we ask the part that hates this boy to just relax a little bit or give us some space or step back? And strangely enough, after I've done this thousands and thousands of times, it's amazing to me to this day that different places in our consciousness actually can step back and relax. And some people will feel a little shift, and then you can go back and say, well, now look at the 6-year-old again. How do you feel toward him now? And the person might say, well, I want to take care of him. And you say, well, okay, what does that part look like? Well, it looks like my grandmother used to take care of me. Well, can you ask that part to step back? Anyway, after doing this for a little bit, what happens is this other quality of this way of being in the world emerges, which we call the self, and that is an experience of openness, curiosity, compassion. So the person will say, well, as I look at this 6-year-old, I just feel this kind of love for him, or this, I just want him to be safe, I just want him to be okay, and I'm kind of curious about why he's so scared. So there is this place that we talk about called the self, which is different than the parts, and which is something that we all have within us. Sometimes if somebody's very wounded, it takes a while to get to this place or to have this place be an active part of their internal system. But it's from that place of compassion and curiosity and connectedness that we begin to do the therapy with different parts of people.
So the sort of like the heart center comes forward, and who that person truly is as a loving, warm, compassionate individual, that's always inside of us. Every once in a while we get to see that because of what's happened in life that's been packed in or attached to or covered up upon, that's made that part retreat.
Yeah, it's that, and part of the way we look at it here is that those qualities are always there, but they do get covered up because these other parts of us take over. The part of us that says, "Oh, I hate this little 6-year-old in there." And if you, by the way, it sounds strange, but you can actually begin to interact with these parts. And if you say to that part, like, why do you hate this 6-year-old? And the part will say, well, when he's running the show, or when you're coming from that place, you get overwhelmed and you get really, really scared, and that's really horrible. So I hate this part. But the part that I'm just mentioning, the kind of the critical part, does that for a purpose. It really does it for a protective purpose. So, and if that part does it so strongly, then there isn't that kind of those what we call self qualities. We call it being self-led. It's like one of the analogies that Dick Schwartz uses is that the self is a little bit like a conductor of an orchestra that can say, "Oh, okay, here's the time for this to come in," or "It's a good time to be assertive," or "It's a good time to." You're at a funeral. It's a good time to allow yourself to feel this sadness. Whereas some other time, it's okay to be joking around and so forth. So the self has this kind of compassionate curiosity, but also has this sense of leadership within the system.
Okay, and then these different parts, could we say that those are conditioned responses based on their life experience?
Yeah, they definitely. I mean, there's some debate. Some people feel like we're born with all of these parts, and some people feel like we develop them as we go, and there's a different way of looking at it. But certainly, at the very least, certain of our parts we tend to lead with those more based on our experiences. Okay. And so if we grow up in a family that it's not okay to ever speak up, so we have a part that says, "Oh, I better go under the radar because it's dangerous to speak up," then this part, based on our personal history, takes a much stronger role in our system, which might have been very functional when we were a kid, but maybe not so functional as an adult.
Yeah, that's where we hear those statements, "Stop acting like a 2-year-old," or stuff like that from other people. We'll be right back with more here. This is a great conversation with Dr. Paul Ginter, psychologist, and this is Dr. Michael Kudlas, chiropractor in Kalamazoo, on Speaking of Health. We'll be right back.
Helping you make informed decisions for your life. This is Voice America Health and Wellness.
Speaking of Health is brought to you by Old Time Medicinals Essential Oil Formulas. Remedies from yesterday to help you heal today. Have aches, pain, muscle soreness, inflamed joints, or stiffness cut into the joy of your life? Have you been denied the health, wealth, and happiness you deserve? Old Time Medicinals has life-changing products to help you help yourself to a pain-free existence. For more information, email us at oldtimemedicinals@gmail.com. Get your life back now. Email oldtimemedicinals@gmail.com. Leadership is a destination, but how do you get there? More importantly, how do you maximize your power and influence and develop more leaders in your organization? Learn from proven leaders and proven practices. Join Doctors Kathy Greenberg and Relly Nadler for Leadership Development News. This program will help you develop the next leaders in your organization, balance your work life, manage your boss, and manage yourself. We'll feature cutting-edge interviews with industry experts and authors. Leadership Development News, every Monday at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern, on the Voice America Business Channel.
Opinions, options, answers. Voice America Health and Wellness.
You are tuned in to Speaking of Health with Dr. Michael Kudlas. To reach Dr. Kudlas or his guest today, please call 1-866-472-5792. That's 1-866-472-5792. You may also send an email to drmkudlas, speakingofhealth@gmail.com. Now, back to Speaking of Health.
Hi, welcome back. Dr. Michael Kudlas here. We're talking with Dr. Paul Ginter, and we're talking about internal family systems therapy, which is a big fancy kind of approach to, sounds to me like learning to love yourself. With that, we learn about these different parts and how we interact both with ourselves and out in the world. And from the different things that I've studied in psychology, we say that we live our world internally, but we express it externally. Does that go along with internal family systems?
It does. It really does. And part of what we pay attention to is how our internal system is, in fact, impacted. Well, let me give an example of this. I used to work at one point. I worked in a place for court-ordered adolescents near Chicago, and we based the whole treatment program on this internal family systems work. And these kids would do this amazing work. You know, they would get in touch with these parts of them that are very vulnerable, and they would begin to realize that their kind of tough guy parts, were actually very important to protect them, especially in the gangs and whatever, that they, in some ways, if they didn't act super tough, they actually could be hurt, or even in their families. And so they could begin to see that, oh, that's how I protect myself, as opposed to that's who I really am at my core. And then they would begin to get in touch with these very wounded parts of them. But unfortunately, the difficult thing is that we would have these sessions, and then they would go back into these families that were very abusive and very difficult. Yeah. And so we had to pay a lot of attention to, how do we create more safety in their outer life, because otherwise this internal work actually can make them more vulnerable in a way. So, so there's very much a back and forth between internal and external, and again, like I mentioned before, even societal systems, and
So all of that adds up, and I think that's a good example to point up where you were talking about how we have society systems and culture systems and the different applications, that everything looks like one system piled on another, and sometimes those systems will work well, but only in a certain area, only in a certain system. And, it doesn't do much good to treat an abused child and help him and then send him back into an abusive environment. All the protective mechanisms that he's acquired, he needs to have. Otherwise, he probably wouldn't have those things.
That's right.
Now, when you do the family systems therapy and you're working with these people, what are some of the things that you do that might be secondary or strengthening or assisting them to help them anchor the positive things in their body, in their system, so that who they are is expressed in a way that's at optimal health?
Mm-hmm. Well, let me mention a couple things. There's one part of this model that I haven't mentioned that I should say something about, and that is that we talk about different parts of us taking on burdens, and that's just the word that's used. But oftentimes it's the exile parts that we have talked about earlier, and this is when, whether it's ourselves or others, maybe a very explicit message like you're not good enough or you're not lovable or whatever that is, or oftentimes some implicit message, somebody's harsh or something, and so as a kid we think, there must be something wrong with me. So this is part of the work that we do, this internal work. We get in touch with these parts and we begin to find out what they carry with them from the past, and we help them release that. And then, so this is part of follow-up with them is it, and this is a little bit more of a just kind of, in some ways, it looks a little bit more like cognitive behavioral work, more, which is just to be able to notice when, I'm sitting at the store and somebody looks at me funny in line, and then I tap into this tape that says, what did I do? Or something must be wrong with me that they're looking at me, or whatever that is. And so it's like catching us in those moments and begin to see, oh yeah, there's that. It's this part of me that carries this thing. It's not truth. It's just the way I'm holding things or the stories I'm telling. So I wanted to say that. But also, there are some things. There's something I also combine a lot with the internal family systems work. Many people probably listening are familiar with mindfulness meditation, and that's a meditation technique that I won't go into great detail with, but it really develops the capacity to be able to pay attention and notice without getting really hooked in things. And so these meditation practices allow the brain to begin to function differently. And it actually, and I won't go into all that detail, but just amazing research recently around how the brain works, and if we really get caught up in something, it's because there's a certain part of the brain that's really super active, and so this creates these neural pathways to other parts of the brain that are able to step back and say, oh gosh, this isn't a fire, it's just a fire alarm, in essence, and so. So mindfulness meditation is something that we use to begin to train people's minds to not just automatically get hooked into these various parts.
So they become less reactive and more objective, in other words.
Right. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, so the object of neutrality.
Yes.
So we get to be... Gosh, our society could use a lot of that. There is so much judgment out there that, we've got a government that can't govern because of the judgments people are running against each other. And, it's just astonishing. And we see that around the world. People having, in Northern Ireland, how long did the Christians and Protestants fight? 800 years? Right. In Bosnia and Serbia, how many times did they fight? 500 years? And it's astonishing. And it's very often when we see techniques like this come in where you have an opportunity for peace and loving. And what I think is the true human, I don't think we're warlike. I think we're made warlike by playing on the kinds of things you just talked about. Yeah. But when we have an opportunity for peace and loving and being the true humans we are, and you might even say, the Adam and Eve type in us in the very beginning, the innocence and the loving that comes forward, gosh, so many more other things happen because we line up with Spirit. Spirit lines up with us, and the opportunity for expression is far beyond our capacity to understand even.
Yes, yeah.
We have a technique we use with our patients that are having a lot of trouble with someone in their family or someone outside their family. And we call them the 9 magic words. And those are, God bless you, I love you, peace, be still. And we tell them, if you have trouble with that person, get a picture of them. Put it on your refrigerator or put it where you see it every day on a regular basis. And every time your eye catches that, send them the 9 magic words. God bless you, I love you, peace, be still. And I say, and a lot of them go, I don't know if I can do that. And I say, okay, then send them the 11 magic words. God bless you. I love you. Peace, be still. You fool. Or, and pretty soon those other 2 will go away. And you'll be stuck with the 9 magic ones, as the magic is in the healing of what goes on inside of you. And I think, and tell me if I'm wrong, from the internal family systems approach, that's one of the ways you release some of those burdens inside of you. The expression of loving, or I would say healing, is really the application of loving to a place that hurts. And by using those words, or by using the mindfulness meditation where we can come into a place of neutrality and just observe without judgment, then I would say we are approaching who we are as the God-man, as God made us to be on this planet.
Yeah. No, I think that's really true. And I think the thing that, from an internal family systems point of view, that I would add to what you're saying is that we would typically say that in addition, what will be helpful to be able to say those 9 words, especially authentically, is if you're able to also attend to be present with the place in you that has been hurt by that person. Like, what do you do with the fear or the sadness or the resentment? Those places inside you, if we can be present with those things and not get so caught up in them, then we can say those 9 words, and we can. But so we'd probably want to begin to do those things simultaneously, because we'd say, oh yeah, say these 9 words, and all the while just be aware of this is why it's hard to say those 9 words, because there's a part of us that so wants to stay protected. We don't want to forgive this person because we're so scared that if we forgive them, then we'll get hurt again, or we'll let it happen again. And so important to say, oh, what is that place inside that needs to know that we can take care of ourselves and we can be safe, and this person doesn't have that kind of power over us or whatever.
So it's a form of self-acceptance.
Absolutely, yeah.
Self-acceptance regardless of whether it's a good emotion or a bad emotion, so to speak. It's self-acceptance of who we are as an emotional being.
Right. And the paradox is that when we accept these emotions that we typically think are bad, or we don't want to have those things, as we accept them, they soften, they become less intense, and so they begin to dissolve, or at least they begin to shift somewhat. So
This is healing, the application of loving to a place that hurts. And that's when the healing comes forward.
That's right.
Okay, we'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to Speaking of Health. I'm Dr. Michael Kudlas. We're talking with Dr. Paul Ginter. And God bless you. I love you. Peace, be still. We'll be right back.
Step into a healthier you. Voice America Health and Wellness.
Speaking of Health is brought to you by Old Time Medicinals Essential Oil Formulas. Remedies from yesterday to help you heal today. Have aches, pain, muscle soreness, inflamed joints, or stiffness cut into the joy of your life? Have you been denied the health, wealth, and happiness you deserve? Old Time Medicinals has life-changing products to help you help yourself to a pain-free existence. For more information, email us at oldtimemedicinals@gmail.com. Get your life back now. Email oldtimemedicinals@gmail.com.
Step into the doorway to conscious choice, greater health, and well-being. Attain the balance that you've been seeking. Tune in and turn on 1111 Talk Radio. Feed the mind. Embrace positively. Release the tension. Step out of fear. Host Simran Singh will help you broaden your mind and open your heart toward a greater understanding of how to take charge of your life. 1111 Talk Radio is here every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 4 p.m. Pacific Time on 7th Wave Network. 1111 Talk Radio, because shift happens.
What sets apart VoiceAmerica.tv from the other video content providers on the Internet? Choice and flexibility means that you can host your video content live or on demand on the main VoiceAmerica.tv channels through your own branded media player or your own private TV channel. We support multiple media formats, so all of your video content can be in one place. We offer a number of advertising and video packages. For more information, visit VoiceAmerica.tv. If you think you've seen online TV like this before, let us surprise you.
Opinions, options, answers. Voice America Health and Wellness.
You are tuned in to Speaking of Health with Dr. Michael Kudlas. To reach Dr. Kudlas or his guest today, please call 1-866-472-5792. That's 1-866-472-5792. You may also send an email to drmkudlas, speakingofhealth@gmail.com. Now, back to Speaking of Health.
Hi, welcome back. Dr. Michael Kudlas here, talking with Dr. Paul Ginter. And one of the things, we're talking about internal family systems therapy, which is a big fancy word for really learning how to love yourself in a very specific way to help you express yourself as the true human that you are. And with all of these things, now this is an established psychological technique, and whenever you get into techniques, there's always somebody out there who's going, what's the best? And let's figure it out, and let's find out, oh, here we got this technique, what's wrong with it? Somehow, instead of what's right with it, we always got to go after what's wrong with it. And so with the internal family systems, are there any criticisms that you found? I know that they talk about there's no, quote, empirical data comparing it to other proven methods. I'd like to know what those proven methods are, but do you find any kind of criticism of the therapy as an expert in that therapy? How do you respond to questions where they say, well, you don't have any empirical data, therefore, blah, blah, blah?
Yeah. Well, yeah, let me say a couple of things about it. One of the things that I was drawn to this work because of people that I trusted that were talking about how powerful it was, and people that I knew that had, people that taught at universities and taught other kinds of models, that all of a sudden they began to do this kind of work and were just absolutely just amazed at what was happening in sessions. And so, so I'm not that interested in it if it doesn't actually make a difference. And
yeah,
actually,
sort of like, what is the best? This seems to be the best.
It seems that, well, I tell you what, I mean, I know a lot of people that have tried a bunch of different things, and most everybody, I don't know of anybody who's done this. I mean, there probably are people out there, and I know we all have different preferences about the way we work, but most everybody I know that has come to this end up really embracing this and kind of letting go of some other ways of working. So that's what that has brought me there. Now, I do want to say, in terms of the people, the folks of us that are trainers and other folks that are interested in this work, we are interested in getting some research that actually does show impact of this work. And so there are some studies that are being done. As you may know, it's hard to do psychotherapy outcome studies because it's not always easy to know exactly what is it where, is this person actually doing the model or are they not? And how do you operationalize this? And there's a lot of moving parts to this, so it's not super easy to do.
I think in our profession here, it's not so much the technique that's being misevaluated, but what we're seeing there's a lot of clinical research that shows this is highly accurate by a lot of different therapists. So that's something, and it's perhaps the science approach, the technique or scientific design that's weak, that isn't providing the best opportunity for an appropriate evaluation.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I do want to just say, I want to just mention one study that has been done that was quite amazing. This was actually a person who had been interested in doing, was exposed to IFS work, and she was a rheumatologist at one of the hospitals that's connected to Harvard, and she really wanted to do a study showing, does IFS actually make a difference? And so there was a treatment group compared to several control groups, like I think a control group and another treatment, a different kind of treatment, and then an IFS group. And I believe the IFS group, the people had therapy every other week individually and then had maybe a once-a-month group IFS approach. And I've seen this woman speak a couple of times, this doctor, and she's very much of a doctor and a researcher and connected to Harvard, and a very high-level person. And she was just absolutely amazed at the research that came out. And she was imagining when she designed the study that people with arthritis would end up having less anxiety, less depression, maybe kind of emotionally have a better sense of well-being. But what they found was that just absolutely floored them was the significant differences in physiological impact between groups. And so the groups that had the IFS therapy and group therapy ended up having significantly less swelling in their joints, significantly less pain, on all kinds of different measures. I guess with arthritis you can measure these things in a whole lot of different ways, self-report and physiological, all kinds of, and like basically across the measures, significant differences.
And I think that points out the mind-body connection, that
Absolutely.
We aren't just a body. The Cartesian dualism just is totally inappropriate.
Right.
And some of that scientific research is in the same kind of mode where it's old-fashioned. It's old research. And it's almost as if you're talking with Newtonian physics, and then you get into quantum physics. That's a whole different world, a whole different set of rules, a whole different set of reality. Yeah. And we have to take into our understanding that we create our own reality. And to a certain degree, that's going to be made manifest. So if you go in with the idea that, I've got this hypothesis that this isn't going to work. Yeah, you're right. It's not going to work. And, I've got this hypothesis that it is going to work. Yeah, you're right. It's kind of like Henry Ford said in court one time, if you think you're right, you are. If you think you're wrong, you're right. It's like it can be either way.
Yeah.
And, boy, this hour has flown by. We've got just a few minutes left here, Paul, and I wish we could be going on for another hour. Is there a way that you could kind of sum up family systems therapy and give people the opportunity to find out more about this system?
Sure. Yeah. I'll just say, in general, the thing that I just think is so wonderful about this therapeutic model is that it really has this very deep respect and appreciation for different aspects of it and different aspects of ourselves. And so really, things that when we typically think of people as being resistant in therapy, it ends up reducing a lot of that. And anyway, so I'm just so grateful for having this be in my life, both personally and professionally. And in terms of finding out more, there's a website called selfleadership.org Center for Self-Leadership.org, and or you can look up Richard Schwartz, and that website has both. There's some clips of Dick doing some talking about this work, and I think there's articles you can get on there. There's a store, and then there's all the trainings and all the trainers that you can get in touch with trainers and practitioners around the country and around the world, for that matter. We have trainings in Europe and the Middle East, and it's growing in that way. And so anyway, the website has access to all of those things if you want. That's probably the best place.
That's great, Paul. Thank you so much for coming today. This has been a fascinating conversation. And if anybody's been even half listening while they're folding their clothes or doing what they're supposed to be doing at work, they learned something of a marvelous technique, one that to me is heart-based, heart-centered, heart-focused, and loving in its nature. And that's internal family systems therapy. I want to thank my guest, Dr. Paul Ginter of Kalamazoo, Michigan, and the Center for Psychotherapy and Wellness. He's an international trainer on this family systems therapy. And Thank you so much. So we'll leave our people with a loving thought today. Join us next week on Speaking of Health. And that loving thought is the 9 magic words. Please start using them. God bless you. I love you. Peace, be still. Till next week, this is Dr. Michael Kudlas, Kalamazoo chiropractor, saying, we'll see you next week.